Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Brandy McNeil. I am Deputy Director of Branch Programs and Services for the New York Public Library. I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library and to this beautiful space overlooking Fifth Avenue. The library in WNYC launched Get Lit with NYC 2 years ago. And since then, it has been a wonderful opportunity for New Yorkers to come together and share their love of reading. We are so proud of how the community has embraced our book club with your enthusiasm for books, and we are proud of the community of readers we have supported. While you're all here, hope you get your library card. We've got a Spider-Man library card, so if you don't already have one, grab one. And feel free to check out the space, maybe check out a few books, and we welcome you back to other events and programs that we offer in this library. In addition, for those watching virtually, hi, I welcome you too as well, and we would love the opportunity to have you come in and visit us soon. Now, I know you're all excited to get started. Tonight, we welcome Margaret Wilkerson Sexton, author of this month's selection, On the Rooftop. The book follows a mother whose dream of musical stardom for her 3 daughters collides with the daughters' ambitions for their own lives. We'll also be joined by jazz saxophonist Roxy Coss, who will share a special musical performance. I want to thank Alison and the WNYC team for being such wonderful partners on the Get Lit Book Club. Before I hand the mic over, we're going to share a clip of her show, all of it with Alison Stewart. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy tonight's program. Thank you.
Welcome to all of it. We got all of it.
All of it. All of it.
Our guest is Secretary Madeleine Albright, Brian Cranston,
Tank and the Bangas.
Barry Jenkins, Celia Keenan-Bolger, Aaron Lee Carr, Esperanza Spalding, Gideon Glick, Helen Yoyemi,
Fab Five Freddy.
Benga Akanabe,
Brene Brown.
Tony Goldwyn, Tandy Newton,
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Welcome to all of it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
What a pleasure.
Hi.
This is so fun.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We're here every day, 12 to 2. Impromptu concert. I love it.
I love it.
I was there for the love of it.
You must tell the truth.
I'm sure everyone's perspective is unique.
There's a lot of truth about the pain of being an immigrant, but they're jokes. We find the funny.
It's our strength.
At what point do you think women's health care will stop being a political issue?
When half of Congress can get pregnant.
Ran out of words, but we do what we do. We don't have no board, so we got to trade twos.
So we trade twos, I was this really dope groove, and Alison was so nice to meet you.
We don't have any fun on that show, not at all. Hey, welcome everybody. So good to see you all here. We really appreciate you joining us for our November Get Lit with All of It Book Club with our partners at the New York Public Library. You can probably see there's a whole lot of microphones on the stage. So this is going to be on the radio next week. So feel free to clap, to laugh, to gasp. So everybody knows that we have a live audience when we play this on the radio. And it's also, we just like to have a lot of fun. We're an interactive program. We want to be interactive in the room. We'll also, to that point, we'll be taking audience questions about 20 minutes in. So some of our producers will have mics. We'll run them up and down. So think about your questions, and you can ask them of Margaret. So let's get this started. Margaret Wilkerson Sexton is the author of The Revisioners, a national bestseller and New York Times notable book, and A Kind of Freedom, which was longlisted for the National Book Award. But we are here today to discuss her latest novel, On the Rooftop. And we're on a rooftop. I've said that joke so many times, and it just never gets old. Want to let you know that because of our partners, more than 2,200 people checked out this book to read along with us this month. Margaret Wilkerson Sexton coming up. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Alison, for that warm introduction.
Of course.
Thank you to the New York Public Library. It's such a joy to be here.
And I always say we're a book club and a book club. so we like to have a good time.
Oh,
so
good.
Everybody
Perfect.
relax. That's
I'm
why we have
ready.
music coming on later.
Yes.
I don't know if people know this, but you were a lawyer.
I was a lawyer. I like to say I am still a lawyer.
Okay, you are a lawyer.
I just don't practice anymore. But yeah, I went to law school. I worked at a firm for a few years, and then I got this awesome opportunity. It was the middle of the recession, and at first I thought, oh my gosh, we didn't have work for some time. And at first it was a nice reprieve because we were working like 20-hour days for all this time. And then after about a week of it, everyone started to get nervous.
Sure.
Like, why aren't we working? Why aren't we billing? What will that mean for the future? And the firm basically didn't want to lay people off. So they came up with this incentive program to get people to leave without having the stigma of layoffs. So they called it Dewey Pursuits. And I was able to leave for, the idea was you leave for a year and pursue your dream. And then you go back. Of course, this firm did go bankrupt, so there was nothing to go back to.
Oh, no.
So, you know, terrible for them, an opportunity for me to continue to do this work. And it's been 10 years.
Is there anything from your time in law school or from your career as a lawyer that proved useful to you and has proven useful to you as a writer?
That's such a good question. I think the hours, the sheer number of hours we had to work at the firm, I think it was nice to be able to have that same philosophy around how I would organize my time when it was time to write the books. You know, it was never a situation where I was like, well, I don't feel inspired today to do it. I just did it. I treated it like a job, and I always have done that. And then also, I think I always go into the books with a thesis or like a message I want to convey, and I sort of structure the book, even the chapters and even the scenes and even what the character's arc will be around what this message is that I want to leave the reader with. And that, to me, lines up a lot with, like, a legal memo and just the structure of a legal memo. It's like, this is the issue. This is how I'm supporting the issue, you know? And it's kind of getting difficult, actually, to remember the components of a legal issue because it's a legal memo because it's been 10 years. But it reminds me of that setup. And so I do think, like, maybe the work ethic and the structure of writing have been helpful. Also, the research, which this is ironic because the thing I hated most about being a lawyer was the research. And then I've gotten myself into the situation where I write historical fiction only. And, you know, it requires a great deal of research for every book. And although it's exacting, I do feel like I depend on it because that's how I get a lot of my ideas, frankly. And so I think I'm borrowing that from the legal world, too.
It's interesting you said it's time to write the books.
Yeah.
So do you have a place you specifically write, and do you have a time that you specifically write?
Yeah. Well, when I first started, I had twin babies, and they're 9 now. And they were amazing at that time. They still are amazing, but in different ways. But at that time, they truly napped for 3 hours a day. And my in-laws are here. Like, they would come, and you would see them. They would nap at the same time for 2 to 3 hours a day. And so I would write during that time. It didn't matter where. I mean, it was usually in my bedroom, but it didn't matter where. And now, it's a little different now. The kids are older. I also teach. And you know, my editor told me this before I got published, and I didn't understand what she meant. But she said there's a difference between being a writer and being an author. And that has turned out to be so true. Like, when I was a writer and I wasn't published, I had more free time. All of the time I could dedicate to the world of writing went into actual creation. But now it's like, you know, so much of the time is going to go into promotional work, marketing work, you know, essays, for instance, all kinds of things. And so now it's a little bit trickier to say I'm going to write for 3 hours a day, and that doesn't happen. But I'm looking forward to, I have 2 months coming up where I'm not teaching, December and January, and I think I'll do like 2 or 3 hours a day. It doesn't matter what time. It's just that I have to write 5 pages a day. That's my only requirement.
And that's your personal requirement.
That's my personal requirement. Nobody else cares if I write 5 pages a day.
Let's talk about the research for this period, 1950s, Fillmore, San Francisco. What was something in your research that really did change your story or changed one of your characters?
Wow, that's such a good question. Well, honestly, like the whole idea fundamentally came from research. I knew that my mom called me in 2007, and she said, one of my relatives calls me, I would say once a week, with a brilliant idea for a book. Okay. Yeah. And you can imagine they're not always brilliant. But my mom calls me in 2007, and she's like, I have this brilliant idea for a book. She's like, you should adapt Fiddler on the Roof, but tell it from a Black woman's perspective. And her idea was really literal. She wanted me to have the woman have 5 daughters, have each of the daughters want to marry someone completely different from the person that the mother would have chosen for them, and then the parallel displacement to Fiddler on the Roof would have been Hurricane Katrina. So the climactic scene at the end of my mother's idea for this book would have been the mother and her 5 daughters standing on their own rooftops holding signs saying, help me, some of the images we were flooded with during the storm. And I tried to do that. I actually thought it was a brilliant idea, and I tried to even imagine doing it, but I had written about Katrina for my first book quite a bit, and even a little bit in the revisioners I had touched on Katrina. And I just didn't want to do that again. And so I thought, well, I have to find another parallel displacement because we know in the end of Fiddler on the Roof, the Jewish community is made to leave their village in Russia. And I just started researching. I didn't know anything about the urban renewal program in the Fillmore district of San Francisco. I didn't know that in the 50s and 60s, thousands of Black people were displaced from their homes. I didn't know any of that. That was purely just like, I thought surely there's another instance of displacement that has affected a Black community besides Katrina. I felt confident of that. So I
Have you met Lincoln Center?
Right. So, and I came across this one, and I thought, I also didn't know that the Fillmore district of San Francisco had been dubbed the Harlem of the West. And that was the case because of the huge jazz scene in the area in that time. So I thought, what a great opportunity to honor the musicality of Fiddler, to be able to access this displacement. And also, I'm from New Orleans. This is my first time not writing about New Orleans, actually. And I thought it would be really neat to honor the fact that so many of the Black people in this community in San Francisco at this time had come there from Louisiana through the Great Migration. I thought it would be a great way to sort of stay in my lane when writing from the perspective of a San Francisco native. Like, she's not a native. She's a transplant, just like I'm a transplant. And it was a good way to be able to borrow what I do know about San Francisco, but also stay anchored in where I'm from.
The book has written from all these different points of view. Who came to you right away? And then who eluded you of your voices?
That's a really good question. Vivian was immediate, and in fact, before my editors, who are also here, Helen and Sarah, looked at the draft, it was almost 90% Vivian, at least 80% Vivian, and they came up with the idea to have the girls have more landscape in the book. I think Esther was the most difficult to write, the second oldest daughter. I had Ruth, and I think I had Chloe. It's always the character, I think, that reminds me the most of myself, that I have trouble accessing. It's almost like I have too much access to her, and it gets very confusing to delineate what's hers and what's mine. And it was the case with Esther. You know, Esther's a writer. Esther's working in a bookstore. Esther feels like her books are family, and various other things I have encountered in common with her. And I think she was the one where sometimes I have to like play around with their fact pattern in order to have them be different enough from me that I'm no longer feeling like the lines are blurry, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by fact pattern?
Yeah. Well, even having her like work in that bookstore, like that was a way to distinguish her from me. I've never worked in a bookstore. Little things like that, like having her start writing these songs and having her, initially her relationship was not going to be with the person at the bookstore. There was another guy, his name was Moses. And so even switching that, like making her, have what, I don't want to give any spoilers, but have that relationship with him as opposed to the other person, it just kind of like loosened it up where it had been rigid. And like I couldn't get in there. I couldn't get into, because like when the characters really come to me effortlessly, that's the best. That's the best way to convey the character. That's always a gift. It doesn't always happen. I think it happens to me 40% of the time. and it feels like I'm truly just typing. And I'm in their bodies, I'm in their minds, and I'm just typing their story. And so with Esther, it wasn't like that. It felt like I was chasing her, you know? And so switching the fact patterns around a little bit, just giving details to her character that weren't there before, just loosened it so that I just was able to kind of, it just felt like it was more of a seamless process of facilitating our merger, if that makes sense.
It also creates more opportunity.
Yes,
Of
exactly.
what you can do with the character.
That's so true.
How do you pick your names of your characters?
It's very difficult, which I don't know why that is, because there's so many names in the world, but
Was Vivian, what was another name that you thought Vivian?
I really think what I sometimes do is I pick names that I was not able to use with my children because my husband vetoed them. And so I'm just like transferring names. And there are certain names that I really like that, you know, like Vivian is one of them. I think that was going to be in one of my books no matter what. She was going to be there. Ruth and Esther, that's from one of the songs in Fiddler on the Roof. I thought it would be a nice homage to the play. And Chloe is another name that I just like, and it's also biblical, although it's kind of, a lot of people don't know that it's biblical, but it is biblical. So I thought that might be a cool way to get that name in there.
Let's talk about Vivian's motivations. Why do you think Vivian never really stopped to question whether her daughters actually wanted to go through with this career?
That's a really good question. And I'm laughing because I learned after I wrote the book that unconsciously Vivian is a little bit based on my mother. So that's why I'm laughing.
Is she laughing?
I hope she's laughing.
Okay.
So I don't know that it mattered to Vivian. Well, okay. I think there's one side of Vivian where I'll say, I don't know that it mattered. Vivian's the kind of mother or the kind of person, I would say, the kind of person where if the opinion doesn't match hers, I'm not sure if it's a relevant opinion to her. Do you know what I mean? Like my dad used to say, my vote is the only one that matters. But I also think...
My mother used to say, democracy ends at the door.
Right, there we go. But I do think this in a more serious way. I think that she arrived in San Francisco. She was escaping the Jim Crow South. She arrived there. She married. She had these 3 girls, and she had all this hope, you know, for a new life, for a reprieve from racism, and she had all this optimism about what she would encounter. And almost as soon as she gets there, her husband dies. And I think she has all this hope that wasn't quite met with an actual concrete scene. And so I think the only thing she knew to do with it, because I don't think she was the type of person to sit and examine, I think the only thing she knew to do with that feeling of misplaced hope was to transfer it over to her daughters and her dreams for their singing careers. And I don't think it was ever about the singing, though. I don't think it was ever about, and there's even a line in the book where that's referenced, but, you know, it's not about the furs, it's not about the money, it's not about the stardom, it's about security. And I think, you know, this is the 50s and the 60s, and how many opportunities did a Black woman have at that time to have that kind of security? And I think she somehow mingled in her mind the opportunity for security and the success that these girls would achieve as singers. And once they were mingled, I don't think she could extricate one from the other. And so I think, yes, she's the kind of person who doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, but I also think that was the only thing she knew to do to protect them.
So you have 3 siblings. It's always tricky dynamics with any siblings. Did you do any research in birth order about behavior?
Only through my own personal interest from years ago, but no, not for this book. I'm an only child. Well, I have a brother, but he was born when I was 16.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I think I like to write about sisters because I always wanted a sister, but you know, I don't have personal experience with it. Does it match up with your ideas of birth order?
Well, I think about the older child always sort of mothering or sort of trying to take care and be responsible.
Yes.
And I was curious about it.
Yes.
When you think about Ruth, when Ruth becomes a mother herself, I think it's Esther who says you found your way out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But something draws Ruth back to the club. There's something about wanting to come back, maybe even to the music. What is it that Ruth is missing, especially since she's the one that supposedly got out?
Right. And it's interesting because in the first few drafts of the book, I didn't have that. I didn't have Ruth changing her mind. I had her like leaving and being okay with that. But, I started to it was my editors when they suggested that I give the girls more landscape. And it's back to what you said about that gives you more opportunity to really get to know them on a deeper level and to really flesh them out. And what I saw was that Ruth she's never known her father. She's always yearned for this family. And I think she thought that wound, that longing would go away once she actually recreated the family for herself. But it's just a wound, and I don't think any external circumstance is going to change it. So it just went somewhere else, and so she still has that. And then she also has this new baby, and she's in the house all day. And I think a part of her, without knowing it, did rely on the bright lights and the audience and the applause. And I think the only way that she knows to get rid of that feeling that's somehow still there, even though she got this family, is to go back to the club scene. I don't think she can imagine any other way to find it.
Esther finds herself in her ability to write protest songs, and part of what we do with our book club is we put polls up in between on Instagram at Olive at WNYC, and I put one up asking, well, what's your favorite protest song? What's a protest song that is moving to you?
I love that.
Yeah, somebody said People Have the Power by Patti Smith, El Pueblo Unido by Jamás Será Vencido, if I said that right.
Wow.
Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young.
Wow.
Do you have a favorite protest song?
I have to think about that. I'm going to come back to that at the end of our talk.
Okay.
Not one that comes to mind, but I will say.
But you did write the songs.
I did write the protest songs. I realized midway through the process that the songs that I had picked that were actual songs were legally not going to be able. The lyrics were legally not going to be able to be included in the book. And I did used to write songs when I was a kid. I wrote lyrics when I was a kid, and my editor said, "Why don't you try writing the songs? You could always do that." And at first, I thought that was just ludicrous, just in terms of my own capacity. But I thought, I think that's okay because, Esther's not winning Grammys yet for her songwriting, and so we're kind of, we're on the same page. Like, it's in my wheelhouse to write the songs that Esther would write.
Let's talk about Chloe. Why do you think Chloe has this love for singing and performing that her sisters don't?
I know, and that's another thing that came to me many drafts later. I did not realize that Chloe was going to actually, initially it was like very superficial in a way, relatively. Like they didn't want to do it, just like Fiddler on the Roof. They didn't want to do it, and they had their personal reasons why, but I didn't really get into that because it was Vivian's story, And then once I started getting into the girls, I still didn't see until later that, oh, well, maybe it's not true that they all don't want to do it. You know what I mean? I think she just loves it, and I think nobody's been paying attention because she's the third child. And I didn't say this. I have not done research on birth order, but I have 3 children, and that third child, I do think sometimes, you're not always paying attention to the intricacies of what's going on with that third child. And I think that's exactly what happened with Chloe. And I think for various other reasons as well, dealing with colorism, et cetera, I just don't think it dawned on anybody that she could do it. And the whole while, she's the one who actually has this like innate joy when she's singing. And she's the only one for whom the singing is actually coming from a pure place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has a brief love affair with a white man who, spoiler alert, does not end well. And it's the one thing, and Vivian is horrified, just clearly horrified, more angry than with Ruth for becoming pregnant and leaving, more angry than Esther for skipping the audition. Why was this too much for Vivian?
Oh, the time period. I think it was truly unthinkable, And
Free-loving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because her main motivation was to secure protection for the children, to have one of the children do something that's so blatantly going to put them in the line of fire as a family and as a community, I think is just shocking and unthinkable to Vivian. I don't even think she knows how to even begin to process it. And it's interesting because I'm married to a white man, and at one point, I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but it was like, how much of the story do you want that to be? That she's with this, you know, that could be a whole story in itself, that she's with this white man. And also it was really difficult to try to figure out how to depict the relationship because we're in 2022 now, but they're not in 2022. So I can't put my lens on what was going on there, you know? And also like what kind of man to make him, because again, he's bound by the times that he's lived through. So it was a really tricky balance to tell the story of their relationship in a way that I felt like would accurately honor the period that we were talking about, but also honor Chloe as a person who wouldn't demean herself by being with a man who wasn't respectful, despite the times, you know. But I also, you know, in Fiddler and even in the other parts of this book, you know, the women end up with the men that they've chosen, or with the decisions they've chosen. I also wasn't, you know, that was tricky too, figuring out how to end that. But again, I think this is a situation where I have my lens and I was able to put a piece of it onto that story, but I couldn't consume the story with what I know now and what I think now because we're in different times.
We're going to start asking audience questions in about 5 to 8 minutes, so get ready. There's a mention of some Gwendolyn Brooks poetry.
Oh, yeah.
And on Instagram, we asked people who were some of your favorite African-American poets, and Lucille Clifton came up, and Langston Hughes. And the poem that you mentioned is Sadie and Maud, and I'm going to read it really quickly.
Thank you.
Maud went to college, Sadie stayed home. Sadie scraped life with a fine-tooth comb. Scraped life with a fine-tooth comb. She didn't leave a tangle in, her comb found every strand. Sadie was one of the livingest chits in all of the land. Sadie bore 2 babies under her maiden name. Maud and Ma and Papa nearly died of shame. When Sadie said her last so long, her girls struck out from home. Sadie has left as heritage her fine-tooth comb. Maud went to college, is a thin brown mouse. She's living all alone in this old house. Why was that poem important to reference?
Yeah, it was referenced in Esther's section, and I think and I think pretty early in Esther's section, and I think when we meet Esther, that's sort of the life, and I'm looking at this in a very like, I'm not going to get into the poem like in terms of like critical depth, but I think just like ostensibly on the surface, I think that Esther felt like she was doomed to Ma's life, and I thought it was interesting to put that there just to show her arc, because you know her, and not to say that anything's wrong with Maud's life, and not to get into that into too much depth, but like, you know, Esther comes a long way in her trajectory, and even if she made the same decisions as Maud, I don't think it would be for the same reasons, nor would I think it would have the same emotional outcome for her at the end, you know, with the trajectory that I gave her.
When you came on our show, we do a preview with authors, and we asked you if there was anything you wanted readers to pay special attention to, and you said you wanted people to look out for Preacher's First Sermon and see what it was foreshadowing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
What did you want that sermon to tell readers about what might be coming?
Well, I think it was like, and I loved writing this sermon. I do love listening to and writing sermons. I think it was like, you know, you have to, I'm not going to say it as well as Preacher, but you have to let go. You know, you think you have this idea for your life, and then God has a different idea for the life, and you just have to let go and surrender to that higher power's trajectory for you. And that's what, you know, that's what Vivian has to end up doing with her girls. I think she's trying to assume way too much authority in their life, almost like a god. And I love the scene at the end where, you know, she's on the roof herself, and she's singing to herself, and it's like, that's enough. Nobody else has to be involved in this singing anymore. I can do it for myself. And I think seeing that, I always knew when I wrote this book that would be the final scene. That's what I wanted for her from the beginning. And so I think Preacher's words were like an indication, even when I was writing, of where I wanted to take her.
That's a good place to
Okay.
get to some audience questions.
Perfect.
Let's get our microphones up. Anybody have any questions? Right here.
What authors do you read that might inspire you?
Thank you. Well, I read Edward P. Jones and Elizabeth Strout. I love Tayari Jones. I love Jamaica Kincaid, Edwidge Danticat. I love Jennifer Egan and Lauren Groff. Is there anybody, I always have to honor Toni Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but a variety of readers. Of authors.
Thank you. Where am I coming from?
Hello, congratulations on your success, by the
Thank
way. You're welcome. As an inspiring writer, I heard you say that you motivated yourself to write 5 pages a day.
Yeah.
Now, when you get writer's block, you know how you have one idea and you're trying to write that idea. Do you go and just write, you still write your 5 pages and maybe write another idea? Do you stick with the one idea that you're writing?
I love this.
That's a good question.
Isn't it? Okay. This happened to me with, after I wrote my first book, A Kind of Freedom, I was writing this book about Black kids at a boarding school, which never ended up getting published, but I did write the book. And I got stuck. I guess that's writer's block. I got stuck, and I ended up, as you said, writing the 5 pages on a different topic. And it was completely random. It was just to give myself a creative break so that I could maybe like loosen up some storylines for the other book. And I just was writing about something that I saw, like in a vision. It was like this circle of enslaved people sitting around a fire, like involved in some sort of ritual where they were deciding which one of them would be able to escape the plantation and get the support of the rest of the enslaved people. It was some sort of lottery system, and I had just seen that. And so I started writing that. And that ended up becoming the basis for The Revisioners, the second book that I wrote. And I actually ended up abandoning the boarding school idea altogether. It became clear later that that was the right thing to do. It wasn't just because these 5 pages that I wrote about the enslaved people was so riveting. It became clear later. But to your question, yes, I do. Well, first of all, I always write the 5 pages even within the book that I'm writing. I always will write 5 pages unless I'm majorly stuck, and then I'll do that creative block thing that I was just talking about. But they don't have to be great pages. They just have to be pages that are taking me where I want to go with this book. So I outline initially, so I kind of know where I'm going, and I just have to write the 5 pages according to that outline. It does not have to be, in fact, it's almost never polished. It's just not. But I just need to get that out, and then I go about my day. And it only takes a few hours. But that keeps me on pace, because what I've noticed is, like, the time is going to pass either way, whether I write the book or not. Whether I write those pages or not, the time is going to pass. So I get to the end of the year, and if I've written those pages according to the outline, then I have the pages I need to make up that book, But I find the question interesting, though, because you're right that if you're stuck, it is important, I think, to venture into another creative outlet for a minute and then go back later when it's less rigid for you. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that. I think that's a good idea. And just keeping the rhythm of writing going, so you're not writing, you're just letting it loosen up for that project. Okay.
You stay committed.
Yes. Yes.
Stay committed. You still wrote your 5 pages, whether it was on topic or not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good question.
Isn't that a great question?
Anyone else? Right there.
So music was such a big part of the book. Did you have a specific playlist that you were listening to
Hey,
while
that was
you were
my
writing?
next question.
Oh, really? You know what? I listened to like Mahalia Jackson. I did listen to all the jazz greats that I've named in the book. And I was listening to them constantly, but I thought of that more as work for the book, just to like orient me around the scene. And I also have this friend I went to college with who's a jazz musician today. And so he helped. We would have these conversations, and he would send me music, and I would send him, parts of the book, and he would advise me. But for some reason, like personally, when I was writing this book, I was always trying to listen to Mahalia Jackson in my car. I don't know where that came from, but I was like obsessed with that, and I'm still doing that today. But it was like, I wonder if Vivian was starting to listen to her, or if she would have been listening to like Clara Ward, who preceded her, those kinds of performers. I wonder if it's what the girls were listening to because they started out in the gospel scene. But that's what I was personally drawn to when I was writing the book.
I want to make sure I'm not ignoring this side of the room. Any questions on this side of the room? Oop, right in front of you.
I'm not on that side of the room.
That's okay.
Hi. You started off your discussion saying that you approach your writing style quite similar to your previous career, which was in law, going to do like a brief or something like that. And being in a very similar career, I wanted to ask, like, well, how do you then think of your themes? And you had mentioned, like, oh, I already know what arc my main character is going to go through, and I write around that. Well, how do you identify that arc? How do you identify your major theme and then build this whole world around that?
Yeah. Wow. You know what? I just did a craft talk on this on Wednesday at the school where I teach, where I literally went through, because I'm working on something. I'm going to start working on something in December. And it's the first time I'll be writing a book with just one POV. I always do multiple POVs, so I'm really excited about it, but I also don't really know how to do it. So I was just talking about the process of learning how to write from one point of view, and also the process of just starting a book in general. So yeah, I do like to start with like a thesis or a theme. And like for this next book, I know that I want this book, and it's kind of just something I want to say because you end up having so many conversations about the book during book tour, et cetera, that it's nice to have the conversations. I like to write about race, and it's nice to have the conversations be centered around a topic that you want to raise awareness of, just because why not, right? And so this one topic that I'm really interested in right now is the next step in healing for Black people, which I think for Black people's own healing is going to involve forgiveness. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out a storyline that can tell that story in a way that respects the fact that there have been horrific things done. Like, I don't want to come out, you know what I'm saying. So so I got the theme first, and then it came to me. This sometimes happens. It happens if I'm walking the dog. It happens if I'm reading a novel. It happens if I'm like just walking. It doesn't matter. It could happen at any time. It's usually not happening when I'm thinking about it happening, though. It's when I'm doing something else. In this case, it happened when I was reading this nonfiction book called Subversive Habits. In fact, I didn't even read it. I just saw the cover. There was a Black nun on the cover. The book came out like 6 months ago, and it's about Black nuns in New Orleans, I think. And I was like, oh my God, Black nuns in New Orleans. That's fascinating. And so I just kind of like, I bought the book, and I just kind of just kept that in my wheelhouse just to have. And this was about 6 months ago. And then the whole time, I haven't been able to write for months because of various things. But I'm thinking about this story the whole time, and I'm just thinking about this Black girl who grew up in a convent in New Orleans in the 50s. That's what I'm thinking about. And then it occurs to me, and this is just totally random. Like, it's just coming. Like, I'm not doing anything active. Then I learned that she makes her way somehow to Oakland in the late 60s to be a part of the Black Panther Party. And so then, and again, I have all this, it's not a lot of time, but it's a lot of brain time where I can just be thinking because I'm not writing right now. And what I'm learning is that's just as important as the writing part. I didn't realize that, but it's just as important because when I sit down now, it's going to be a lot easier because I have a lot of this worked out already. So then I'm starting to learn, like, what is her life going to look like? I'm seriously sitting with her from the age of like 9 to when she dies in her 90s. So I'm going to take her all the way to 2030. So we're going to see like historical, I like to do historical fiction around generational racism, basically. And this time we're going to do it just from one person's eyes. We're going to see the generations through this one person, which is interesting. And the impact what she's gone through has had on her. Anyway, so I got the theme, and then I got much of her story. And then I kept thinking about it. I kept pushing myself, well, what happens to her after the Black Panther Party? And it comes to me that she goes, she ends up having to go to jail. and it comes to me that she has a drug addiction that she's battling. It comes to me somehow based on a story I wrote over the summer that she's going to end up being at the helm of this spiritual commune for women in 2030. Like, all these things are coming to me, and I'm just kind of like sitting and receiving the information. I'm not doing anything with it. And then I go to write my outline. After I read some books told from a one-person POV the entire way. I read 2 of those books just to get some pointers on how to do that, and novels. And then I go to write my own outline based on what I've learned from those books, based on what's been kind of, coalescing in my mind about this character. And now I have the outline. Oh, you know what? I missed a part. I forgot to tell you this. I did do research. So, but it's not major research. I always do it this way first. I do like really superficial research in the beginning, just enough to give me ideas for storyline. Just they don't. It's not even that I'm using those ideas. It's like reading about what was happening stimulates storylines for me around what could happen, and so. I did that, and it's not a big process. I'm going to go back later and do major research to fill in the gaps, but this is just to get me started. So I did that, and that helped inform the outline, too. So now I have this outline. What I'm going to do when I get home in a couple weeks, I'm getting home tomorrow, but what I'm going to do in a couple weeks is I'm going to go through that research one more time, still skimming. It's still superficial, but I'm going to go through it one more time, and then I'm going to sit and just start, and I'm going to start from the child's perspective. I realized that I basically just like summarized this craft talk, and did I answer your question? I don't know.
He did.
Okay.
You write in the acknowledgments, my writing group makes me better.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of writing group is it, and how did they help you with this particular book?
I was just talking to my editors about this. They're literary stars for first of all, but like, it doesn't even matter. That's not the part. I don't depend on them for that, because honestly, we don't even workshop novels. We're just workshopping stories. And so the main thing that we sell, we don't even workshop with each other. It's just the support. It's just like, I didn't get an MFA, which many writers have. I'm not going to say most, many writers have, many writers of literary fiction. And so I don't have these like writing communities, and it's been really difficult to find good ones, and like, and so it's just nice to have their support. Like when my book came out, they did a party, and like if I ever have a question, there was this really, really, really sad story about a woman who had like plagiarized, and her book deal was taken from her, and it was not relevant to me in any way. But because I'm extremely neurotic and paranoid, I was like focused on this for like a week. Like, oh my God, what if that were to happen? Like it was not a risk. It was not any, any tie to me, but I was like obsessed with it. And we all were. Everybody in this writing group was. We're like calling each other like, oh, freaking out. It's nice to have other neurotic people who understand that you're like, this is not real, but let's talk through it as if it is. Just stuff like that. It's just really nice to have them. They know what you're going through. Like, they know what it's like. I don't think people realize how vulnerable it is to put a book out into the world, and then that's it. You just are whatever people have to say about it is what they have to say about it, and that's kind of it. You can't take it back and revise it. It's over. And so, everyone in the group expresses it in different ways, but I think at least we all understand it, and we can be there to support each other through it.
Will we see any of these characters again?
I don't think so. I never do. I just kind of like, I get sick of them after a while, and I just kind of move on. I'm ready to deal with this new woman. I haven't named her yet, but this new woman, who grew up in a convent. I'm like ready to deal with her, and yeah, I kind of I will say there was one character that I wrote who has really stayed with me, like just almost like a mentor, and she's just a character. She's not a real person, but it's Josephine from The Revisioners. I don't think anybody will ever see her again, but I feel like she stays with me. Other than that, I kind of just move on.
All right, then you need to get these books signed, your book signed, after we are finished, because that's it for these characters.
Right.
Margaret, thank you so much for being with us and all the time you spent with us this month.
So enjoyed talking
really
to
great.
you, truly.
Are you ready to hear some jazz?
Yes, I can't wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Considering the novel is full of jazz music, we invited Roxy Coss, a band leader, composer, saxophonist, and Juilliard faculty member. She's also the founder and president of the Women in Jazz organization, WIJO for short, which offers mentorship opportunities to women and non-binary musicians. Joining Roxy on stage to perform is guitarist Alex Wintz. Roxy and Alex, take it away. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, by the way.
Thank you for having us.
It's so nice to have, it's so great to hear live music.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you for coming and thank you for having me. Yeah.
So the rumor is you started on the piano at 5.
Yes.
When did the saxophone enter the picture?
9. But I think, I recently saw a home video of my grandmother holding me at 2 weeks old, blasting Count Basie into my ears. So I think it had started before that. But I chose the saxophone because all the cool boys at school were playing. Of course, they've quit by now, but it's okay.
And you didn't, and you're here on stage. When you were thinking about, it's interesting you mentioned Count Basie. I was going to ask, because we've been talking about jazz from the 50s, who were some of the classic saxophonists that you admire or that you would like people to know about or after this event go listen to?
There's so many, but John Coltrane, Dexter Gordon, Joe Henderson, Wayne Shorter, Sonny Rollins, Stan Getz, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young. I'm going to keep going and going, so cut me off.
When did you realize that you really were going to be able to do this as a living, that you were going to be able to be a professional musician?
Have I really? No. I decided that I wanted to do it when I was 15 for the first time, but I do think you have to recommit to it every day. It's a relationship. It's like a marriage. Mm-hmm. And just because you decided, yes, I'm going to do this, you kind of have to keep recommitting. But it was the first time that I had traveled to New York City that really solidified it for me. I grew up in Seattle, and my jazz band was very competitive and very good jazz band for the age. We came to this competition, essentially Ellington Competition and Festival of Jazz at Lincoln Center. I played with Wynton Marsalis, and there were stars in my eyes. But really, I saw everything from that, Alice Tully Hall performance with him to I went to a jam session at Cleopatra's Needle and saw kind of the other side of what that might look like. And even though my life doesn't necessarily look like that thing, it really lit a fire of like, oh, this is something I could do.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you said recommit, because Margaret was talking about writing 5 pages a day. Yes. What's your 5 pages a day?
Yes, there's so many parallels. It's really awesome to hear that. I do think, just getting on the horn is a feat for the day. And we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but, sometimes I'll pick it up and 15 minutes later, my daughter wakes up from her nap, or I get an email that ends any plans for my day. But a lot of times just getting it in my hands opens up a couple hours worth of ideas that I want to work on. So just I leave it out often just to remind myself, like, okay, pick me up. But also, as Margaret mentioned, being a saxophonist used to mean playing the saxophone. And these days it means a lot of like, hey, everyone, I exist, and teaching and promotion and all of those types of things. So
you mentioned your daughter, and you had an album out earlier this year, Disparate Parts. You were 7 months pregnant when you made the album?
Yes. It's crazy. I wouldn't recommend it, no.
I was actually thinking about your breathing, about actually the physicality of playing. We all saw how, physical it is when you play. Doing that when you're pregnant, what was that like?
And the breathing, it's definitely that, because if you've been pregnant, you can't breathe. And it does require a lot of breath to play. I actually brought an exercise ball to the studio, and a lot of it too is just like, physically holding it. I sat on a stool a lot, which normally I just stand all the time when I play. But for all of the challenges, I do think I felt out of shape. It was also during the pandemic. It was just like I wasn't playing as much as I normally play. But there was a different energy, and I did feel like because I knew I had less stamina, I had to get it out. And it was like I used a lot of first takes and was just like, I don't care what it sounds like right now. I just need to get it down kind of another parallel. Just we can refine it later. Whatever it's going to be today.
So, Roxy, you were the founder of Women in Jazz organization, founded in 2017. We mentioned that it features mentorship programs for rising jazz musicians. What were you seeing that made you realize you needed to take this step and start this organization?
A bunch of things coalesced at the same time. I mean, for most of my career, I have been the only woman any place I show up in jazz. I didn't notice that. I mean, I noticed, but I knew that was just what it was. It was normal. And I got sick of it. And I had a situation where I toured with an all-female band, and we started to share stories, and a lot of traumatic stories. And this abuse of power in jazz is rampant, and it's a misogynistic art form at its core. And it's an art form that gets passed along through mentorship and through generations, and there's no HR and all of that. So anyways, I started to realize how important it was to connect with other women, because it made me realize it's not my fault, and I'm not crazy, and I'm not alone. And so I wanted to provide some spaces for women to connect, and I think it was in the air. I mean, we met for the first time right before Me Too went crazy and Time's Up and all that stuff. So I know that it was in the air in a general sense, just in the culture. There were a couple other women in jazz projects and ideas popping up around New York City. And so I was like, what if we came together, or stronger together? And as I started to imagine what it might be, it started as a selfish personal pursuit. I started to collect a list of women I knew of in jazz, like my friends. I thought it would be 10 women. It turned out I knew about like 100 in New York. And I was like, I didn't even realize that. And that's part of the problem. We're kept to be separate and competitive and all of this. So then when I saw that number, I thought, well, then it can't just be for me. Because once you hit a certain threshold, it needs to start to be inclusive. That's when the word organization came to my mind. It was like, this needs to be as inclusive as possible and as big as possible to make sure that anybody could participate in this and get something from it.
On a very practical level, what do these networks mean for young musicians?
Well, it started really for professionals only, and the mentorship program came after. We really wanted a space for professionals because we don't have support. I mean, when you're a student, you have resources, you have support at school. However, we realized right away that the women who have made it and haven't quit and have some form of success or notoriety don't have time for this. And those of us doing this work, it's very challenging because we're full-time musicians, which, as we know, is like 30,000 jobs already. But we realized, like, we can't change the past. We can't change what the situation is for these older established women. We can make a better future, and that's the most important thing. So a lot of energy has gone into the mentorship program and into what do we do long-term to make sure that we are addressing, yes, the current state of things, but building a better future for the next generation.
You released an album in 2018 called The Future is Female, with tracks like Nevertheless She Persisted and Females Are Strong as Hell. When you're composing a piece like this, you don't have lyrics. You have to express yourself through your choices of chords, your progressions. Tell us a little bit about trying to get that message out, the future is female, without having lyrics.
Well, I think, you were talking about protest music earlier, and that is, jazz to me is protest music at its core. I think for me as a composer, I've always just written what I'm going through personally. I've tried to express that in the music. Now, I could sit here and give a whole talk on my compositional process and break it down in a way that only probably musicians would understand. But I think that process, it was just a natural thing that's what I was really thinking about and processing at that time. So when I recorded and released The Future is Female was when WIJO came to birth. And it was like, what does it mean to be a woman in this society when Donald Trump was elected? What does it mean to be a woman living in New York City, getting followed home every day? What does it mean to be a woman in jazz when I show up on the gig and people are harassing me at my workplace? What does it mean to be a woman? I have a voice in my music. I have a voice in my composition. So it was just sort of a natural thing that it would come out in that way for me.
What does your daughter think of the saxophone?
She loves it so much. She calls it Gets. she can't say sax, and she always asks for more. And she has a little plastic saxophone. She now knows how to wiggle her fingers. She's 15 months, and she puts her mouth in the right place. And afterwards, she drops it and applauses.
She claps for herself.
So she knows the whole deal.
The future is your daughter. You're going to play a couple more songs for us. What are we going to hear?
Yeah, so we started out with what has become the theme song for my band, and Alex Wintz on guitar.
Alex, yeah.
Alex has been a member of my quintet since 2012, and Don't Cross the Coss was the name of that piece. It's become, everybody mispronounces my name Cross, so I had to write that. And the next piece we're going to play is from the newest album, which is called Disparate Parts, and this piece is part of a suite of songs that I composed that was the inspiration for the album. This particular movement is called Part 4, The Spirit, and there are 3 other parts, but you can do your research to find out what they are. But this is The Spirit, and then we'll close out with a composition, effects, called You're There, which I wrote for my husband.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Roxy Coss. Just want to say thank you so much to Roxy Coss and to Alex Wentz as well. Of course, to Margaret Wilkerson Sexton for being our author this month. Margaret is making her way outside so she can sign some books for folks in the lobby. I want to thank some people. Thank you very much to our partners here at the New York Public Library for hosting us here and providing e-copies for everybody all month. Want to thank Brian Bannon, Giselle Dixon, Brandy McNeil, Michael Santangelo, Morash Stoll, Erica Parker, and Zena George. Thank you to everyone from Park Boulevard Productions for helping us run the show. Did you see they made the lights match the book cover? That was really styling. And for streaming it online for all of our virtual viewers. Glad you guys were here as well. And thanks to the folks at WNYC who put together Get Lit. Megan Ryan, not that one, Jordan Loft, Simon Close from Team All of It, Ed Haber and George Wellington, our excellent WNYC engineers who recorded all of this for the radio. Fingers crossed, we'll get it on the radio Monday afternoon. If you don't already follow us on Instagram, please do, at All of It WNYC. That's where we host our book club in between. We're going to take a break in December because, you know, it's December, holidays, everybody's busy, but we will be back in January 2023 with a whole winter slate, so stay tuned for that. I'm Alison Stewart. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I hope you had a great time.